Yeah, okay. So welcome, Martin. And oh, I think Benoit is just connecting to audio.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, yep, it sounds
Yes,
good.
fantastic. Okay.
Perfect.
Sorry, I was trying to log in for.
Can anyone hear me?
Yep, you're good as well. Yeah, apologies for the Zoom workaround, I guess, if it was a bit difficult to join. Yeah, there might have been some difficulties there, but hopefully it all worked out.
No worries. Hopefully we're all there. And
yeah. Okay. So I think you both should know how it's pretty much going to run generally. We're just going to run through maybe some general questions at the start. So I can maybe share my screen real quick to show. We'll just be running through some general questions. So stuff like just tell us about yourself.
Can anyone hear me?
Yep.
yes.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Perfect. And then stuff like what is fintech, just sort of the basic rundown. And then we'll move into the open Q&A where we just allow the participants to send some questions and maybe go more in depth with the stuff that they want to ask. And yeah, that should take us through the entire session.
Okay.
So yeah, right now we'll probably just wait a little while for the attendees to start coming in, and then we'll just get started. Okay, so I think we can just get started right here. And as more attendees or participants join in or watch in on the live stream, they can feel free to ask questions throughout. So welcome everyone to our third Finovate session at Discover Tech 2022. We hope you all had a great start to the summer and got to enjoy some of our other sessions along the way as well. Today, we'll be hosting a panel discussion to answer some of the most pressing questions that you may have on the topic of fintech. And so we'll begin with some basic general questions, then move into a more open panel Q&A where you'll be able to ask your questions through the Q&A function. On our panel of professionals today, we have Professor Martin Butcher, an instructor teaching Introduction to Fintech at McMaster University, a past accountant and a leading finance professional. Within Martin's accomplished career, he's explored various sectors, including vehicle leasing, financial regulation, the pension industry, financial consulting, fintech, and academia. Alongside Professor Butcher, we have Benoit Fleury from Digit. Benoit leads the design, development, and implementation of the Digit Wealth Management platform. And he has also worked numerous accomplished roles within the fintech industry, also holding a Master of Science and Business Administration from the University of British Columbia. He is also a CFA charter holder. Please join us in welcoming our wonderful panelists.
Thank you, Andrew. Pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to be here.
Great, so we'll move on directly to some of our general questions just to get to better know the field, the industry, and our great panelists. So firstly, could you tell us a bit about yourself, maybe your program or what you're working on in the industry at the moment?
I can go first if that's okay. Again, what I do is I co-founded a firm called Digit. So Digit specializes in the wealth management industry. So our view is that the wealth management industry is facing tremendous transformation, and we can help it essentially elevate the level of advices that advisors are providing to the end consumers. So we're reinventing the entire way that wealth management services are provided to end clients. As my role as co-owner of the firm, I'm responsible for making sure that we dedicate resources to the right programs that we have internally and so on. But more specifically, I'm overseeing the entire product creation. So everything from the product strategy to the product execution ultimately is my responsibility. Just a quick note, so Digit is the second startup that I've created. I first created, I've worked in 3 software companies before, but started two of them from scratch. The first one that I started was actually acquired by Fortune 500 companies in the US, and Digit is essentially the second startup that I've created.
Yes, I'll go next. So I'm Martin Butcher. What I'm doing is I teach Introduction to Fintech at McMaster at both the undergrad and the graduate level. My approach is we make a difference between the business side and the IT side of fintech. We approach this purely from the business side. So we take the CEO, CFO hat on, and we look at what do we need to do to use this technology. How do we use it? What are the issues that come with it? If we want to implement it, what do we have to do? So a lot of knowing the mechanics, knowing the business use cases, a lot of CSR, a lot of change management, a lot of working with regulation. The view being that it's relatively simple to find a coder. We can shop the whole world for coders. It is a whole lot more difficult to find people on the business side who know how to implement this. And if you are a MBA student and you are about to graduate and you've never done a course in fintech, obviously this is a material problem for you. If you are an undergrad student, especially in the business side of things, and you do not do a fintech course somewhere within your 4-year program, obviously this is going to be a significant problem for you as well. So I approach it from that side. Just to add on to that, one of the things that fintech does is that when all the data comes from the same source, reconciliation as a typical control mechanism fails. I can't reconcile my books against a bank statement if all the data is coming from the same place. So what I need to have is a whole lot of financial analysts who can produce models that I can test the results against to give me some comfort as to whether what I'm seeing from fintech is actually a complete list of records, or I'm only getting some of them. A significant issue because the immutable record is immutable, but doesn't necessarily mean that it's complete.
Perfect. Thank you both for that. And so I guess both of you sort of touched a bit on this already, but just for the students or participants here, if you guys could give a basic rundown on the idea of fintech, or yeah, the stuff behind it.
Sure. In general, so the fintech industry is reinventing the way people either provide or consume financial services. In general, it can be thought of two big broad segments. The first one are firms that services clients directly, and the other ones are firms that service other firms that themselves finance will help consumers. So examples of firms that service clients directly will be very much in the payment sphere. So Square, PayPal, and so on are all payment companies. You've got banking in Canada. You have a firm called Coho. You have wealth management services, insurance, crypto exchanges, and so on. So all of those are examples of businesses that service clients directly. And then you have a whole slew of companies such as mine that essentially service other businesses. So those would touch into identity management, so making sure that people can log in easily, that we know who they are, data aggregation, firms like Plaid and Flinks in Canada, wealth management firms like Digit, financial planning, and so on. So in general, the fintech industry is very broad. It covers many different sub-market or sub-segments, if you wish, and you have people specializing in different sub-segments, but it's important to know that they cover all of those, and their mission in general is to rethink the way that people deliver and consume services in Canada. Yeah.
I would add to that. When I approach fintech, I approach it as blockchain as being the underlying technology, and fintech is just one application of that. If I was in the medical side of things, I'd have medtech and a bunch of other things too. The big issue that we see with this is that, especially with this technology, is that this is very much like when the motor car replaced horse and buggy. Everything that used to be the case in the horse and buggy world is instantly obsolete as soon as blockchain becomes mainstream. So if you are doing things, if you went to business school and you learned things the conventional way, yeah, within 3 or 4 years, you would be obsolete because what you know is completely different. I'll give 2 examples of where this is a material issue for you. One of them is in security settlements. Typically for students, it used to take 5 days to do the trade settlement and confirmation process. It was reduced to 3 days. Everybody thought that was brilliant. Now we can do that entire process in 2.5 seconds. It's been tested, it's there, it's in the box. We can do this on New York Exchange, NASDAQ, and on the TSX. Thing is, you can't do that because were you to implement that, then suddenly we would have thousands of bodies falling from tall towers in New York and across the world. So we have the technology, but we can't implement. The extension of that is that the cash in your pocket is actually obsolete. We now have central bank digital currency. Difficult if you are a student in North America to recognize that, but if you are a student who is from China, digital currency, central bank digital currency was implemented with the Beijing Olympics. Sweden has e-krona, and central bank digital currency materially affects how we currently do banking. So many things are attached to this. Things that you would normally see, as you see today, are basically already obsolete. As soon as this stuff comes into play, you will dramatically changes. And you need to have strategies in place of how you deal with that from a career point of view.
Perfect. So I think as an add-on extension question to this, we're sort of guiding towards this was, oh, can we expect from this field or technology in 5 to 10 years or in the near future?
Okay, I'll take this one on from the central bank. The central bank digital currency is probably one of the most fundamental changes that you're going to see in the near term from blockchain. And keep in mind, blockchain is the underlying technology. The central bank digital currency is just an application. Basically, just for those who aren't aware, what this means is that every citizen in Canada, whether you are a citizen or a company or you're doing business with Canada, you would have a digital wallet at the Bank of Canada. And all of your transactions would be dealt with through the Bank of Canada. And basically, every time you have a transaction, when you want to pay somebody, there would be zero cost. So no cost, no debit fee cost, no Visa costs, no charge to have a Visa card or a debit card, all of this entirely free. The issue with this is that the price for all this nice ability is that you have zero privacy. The central bank, in this case, Bank of Canada, can see your transaction literally all the way from your actual bank account at whatever account it is, whatever bank it is, all the way through to whoever you're paying their bank account, if assuming all of this is in Canada. So you have to be comfortable with having zero privacy, and that's the cost for all of this utility. The flip side to this is Bitcoin. The view is I have zero trust in central banks. I want complete anonymity, at least quasi-anonymity. So that is the opposite of central bank digital currency. And you can think of this as yin and yang, for a better description. You will never get rid of both of them. It'll always be in existence, but at any one point in time, one will have more benefit than the other. So significant change for students going forward. Most apps, there's no need for me to pay cash for a token to use in the app because I could use central bank digital currency instead. And it's here. It's not coming, it's already here.
Okay. So maybe from my perspective, so I'm not as involved in the crypto world, so as far or the blockchain world. So my world is more on wealth and financial technologies in general. So what we are seeing on our side is just a more complete and holistic financial experience. So we're certainly seeing a way where people can provide services that will cover insurance, wealth, banking, all of that provided in a much more holistic manner, and most importantly, in a much cheaper manner. So we certainly expect a whole variety of services, and we're a part of that transformation that will modify the way people are consuming financial services, and that will go beyond payment, but also the investment process and so on. One trend that I find really interesting is tokenization of finance. So in my world, we services a lot of high net worth individuals, and one of the things that high net worth individuals have access to are private placement, private equity investments, and so on. So they get to invest in the real economy via those vehicles. Those vehicles are not necessarily available to retail investors today, but with the tokenization of finance, they will. It's a process by which you can create fraction of shares in illiquid securities and so on, and through that you will be able to purchase things that were not necessarily available to you. That are not necessarily available to you today. So it will allow you to buy potentially a fraction of a Picasso or a fraction of a building, of a land, and so on and so forth. So we think that's pretty exciting because it will broaden the area of investments that people can make in the wealth space. And short of that, all the AI tools that we're investing in are just fully dedicated to improving the client experience and making the services a lot more personable to end users.
Perfect. Thank you both for your perspectives on this question. Moving on, this is maybe more directed for students trying to get involved. What do you suggest they do or maybe get involved with to better understand this field?
Okay, I'll go on this one first. So as a student, when you need to decide which stream you want to be in. Are you going to be on the IT side, in which case you're going to need to know coding and various items along that? Or are you going to approach this from the business side? In which case you are the CEO or CFO of a company, you're the senior manager implementing a solution. It's important because you need to be thinking long term. Going to school is 4 years or 2 years, whatever it is, but where do you want to be 10 years from now, etc. That's the first thing you need to be deciding. As I've said, if you go to a business college, business school, you need to ensure that at least somewhere in your program, you have done a course in fintech. Typically, introduction to fintech would be a good way of doing it. In my courses, whether you're an MBA or an undergrad, you will produce a white paper along with everybody else. And the intent with that is to demonstrate that you know the process, you know the mechanics, you know whether you actually need a blockchain solution or not, you know the consensus mechanisms, etc., etc. All of those are important because when you graduate and you're trying to get hired, that's going to be the first question that's asked of you. If you go up the coding route, obviously many people can speak to this in more detail. I would suggest to you that the harder the coding is, the better for you. And you want to be able to code in Sawtooth and certainly be able to code smart contracts. That'll be a future item. If you're coming up on the business side, obviously you need to do an MBA in this. And I would highly recommend to you that you include a fintech course and you really make sure that you have a lot of expertise in EQ. You need to be really good at EQ. You need to be really good at corporate social responsibility, and you need to be really good at change management. So the soft skills versus the hard skills. We want hard skills, we can hire those pretty easily. Really hard to get the soft skills. And yeah, I know when I went to school, that was the thing we used to hate, was anything soft skill we didn't want to do. But really, that's where you need to be focusing your attention. If you can do those things, then the world becomes your oyster.
I see the world a bit differently than Martin on this one. So on my side, traditionally, people have seen it like, oh, you're either on the business or you're on the technology side. What I'm seeing is a much wider role, and fintech, including people from a wide variety of domain and skill sets and so on. So specifically in my business, we do have developers; they're very important. We do have business people; they're very important. But we have this entire group of people that are there to create product designs, that are there to elevate the end client experience, that are here to understand how humans interact and trying to create a product that will reflect that and so on. So what that leads is the elements that they need is a lot more associated, the skill sets that they need are design thinking, or the way that they're looking at a problem, or they're great problem solvers. And they can be a bridge between what the client is asking for and the technology. And if you look at a firm like Digit, yes, we have, we're about 100 people now. So we have 30 or so developers, but there are also 30 or so people that are financial engineers, product designers, and so on, that help with the product, that don't need to be Uber developers and don't need to be Uber business people, but they need to understand people really well. They need to be great at solving problems and so on. And then we have, and which gives like jobs for people who are great maybe in other elements of life. So we don't just hire from MBAs and developments. We hire a lot of people that might come from a completely different background, that just the way they're thinking is very interesting for us. So from my perspective, I think you should look at it from a broad lens. I mean, I think you should work in something that you're passionate about. That's something that we really look into. And of course, like in a fintech player like ours, you have product managers, user experience, you have client experience people, you have designers, you have marketing people, and so on. So there's a ton of fields where people can come in and contribute to the entire journey.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for both your perspectives. I think there's very valuable tips to learn there. Perfect. And so moving on to our final little prepared question here is just how is fintech using different technologies like AI, for example, to sort of improve the field?
Benoit?
Blockchain is more your area, so I will let you take first stab at it, and I'll answer from my perspective. It's probably more AI. Yes.
So I'll speak to blockchain specifically, because that's the core of what we're talking about. The first thing is that industry very much used to think that when you talk blockchain, you're actually talking fintech. And for many years, we use the term interchangeably. But the reality is that in the medical industry, we use blockchain extensively, particularly around record keeping and the whole idea around privacy. Because obviously, if you get hit in an accident and you're sleeping, and how do we know what drugs you've had and what treatments you've had, unless we can access your records? So we need a way of doing that and be able to do that reliably. Blockchain allows us to do that. So we are seeing lots of uses beyond purely in the fintech, purely in the financial services space. We're seeing it in the medical side of things. I'm doing a lot of work with companies that are using it in the NFT space, and it's basically a version of MIT's block certs. The idea being that if you are a gig employee, how do you verify your experience with another company, such that when the company is gone or your engagement is up, you can now prove your experience to somebody else? You have a resume, how do you prove that if people have moved on? So we can use a block cert to do that. MIT were the ones who originally came up with it. Originally, it was just literally just a block on the blockchain. Now it is an NFT. So it's improving as we go across, as we move through time. So you're seeing it in the HR side of things, proving records. You're seeing it proving in the medical side of things, again, processing records. Obviously in the fintechs, but in the finance sphere, lots of different applications. You are also seeing it being applied to the supply chain. I do a fair amount of work in the supply chain as well. The biggest issue in the supply chain, and I just use a smart contract as an example of this. If I am under a smart contract, I either meet all the terms of the contract or I don't. It's purely a binary outcome. If I did what I said I was going to do, when I said I was going to do it, I get paid. If I did 99%, I don't get paid. So the issue is, how do I relate the physical world to the digital world? Good example would be if I have to deliver my truck to a Walmart location and I've got to be at Bay 4 at some location at 2 p.m., there may be a 1 hour window. I'm either there or I'm not. If I'm not there, I don't get paid. If my truck arrives at 6 o'clock on that same day, I don't get paid. So you would say, I think from a technology point of view, I just gave you a 6 hour window, arrive at my bay within 6 hours. But in practical terms, that's not realistic, because think about an airport. You can't say your plane can show up at New York, at Pearson or Newark, wherever you want to be, anytime within a 6 hour window. It has to be there at a particular time. So we have a problem with the physical world not matching up with the digital world. And that is a major problem around smart contracts. It's easy to program, but when that thing executes in the physical world, it's a whole different animal. There's a lot of work going on around there, how to get around that. We are getting to solutions, but these solutions look very different to what we currently have. And that's it from the blockchain world.
Okay, so from my perspective, we're not using augmented reality or blockchain, but we're making extensive use of AI tools. So a lot of the fundamentally in finance, what you have to do is you have to process a lot of data, either portfolio data with transactions and so on, to produce performance reports. And we're using extensive AI tool to do all the reconciliation that needs to be done to make sure the numbers are right. And that's fundamentally a firm like Digit that is at the core of what we do. And then we also use AI tools to help enhance the client experience. So by tracking what people are using and downloading and where their eyes are going into, what they're clicking on, how they're consuming the various services that they've got, we can tailor the service to different types of consumers. So, and I think that's one of the things that is truly changing in the industry. People used to create one product and sell it, one website. Now what we have is we have a much more tailored experience to the different personalities or type of clients that you have. So that's certainly where we're seeing a lot of development in terms of AI tools.
Yeah, thank you so much for both giving sort of your side of the expertise on the different technologies that definitely helped us understand.
Mm.
Perfect. So that's sort of all the general questions that we've prepared. Now we'll be moving into a more open Q&A. So maybe Benoit or Martin touched on something that you guys are more interested in. Feel free to ask them some questions on maybe their experience. So maybe we'll give a couple moments for some questions to roll in the Q&A section, and then we'll go from there.
So Andrew, do you want to ask Martin or I a question in terms of just to letting people some time to ask, like, let's use this time appropriately?
Yeah, for sure. So I guess maybe we can start off by talking about some of the challenges that maybe some of you guys that you guys have faced throughout your entire career getting into this field, or maybe furthering your business or your research.
Yeah. I'll probably start with this just because I've done so many different industries. One of the biggest issues I know when I first got into fintech, basically I wrote an MBA paper on it. And the problem that I had was I couldn't find a supervisor. This would have been maybe 2012, 2013. Literally, a Bitcoin paper had just been written in 2009. There wasn't anybody who knew anything. So trying to find someone who could supervise your paper wasn't practical. So I ended up getting the chancellor of my university and a CEO from a different company, them to jointly supervise my research. I benefited tremendously from that because I got purely a business point of view. So the first question your CFO is going to ask you is, how is this going to make us money and why? And if you can't answer that question, then everything else you've got to tell me is useless. I might as well not do anything. Things have changed quite a bit today. Now, if the question comes into McMaster, I'm almost always going to be the person you talk to. If you choose to do a research study at Mac and you need a supervisor in fintech, it's going to be me. So things are changing quite a bit, especially on the business side. In terms of other things, I know when I come from the finance side and the regulator's point of view, so I see more things than others would see. When central bank digital currency was being introduced, there were lots of different ways about how to do it, all of it happening behind the screen, and lots of concern about what this would do to different industries. If you were doing something with stablecoin, basically the way you were doing stablecoin up until now was going to be made obsolete pretty much instantaneously. And stablecoin really works much better in other applications than what we're doing right now. Today's issues with crypto and stablecoin pegs breaking is just a further proof of the issues with stablecoin today. But when you talked about this 5-6 years ago, you said, well, this is the first time round. What happens if your pile of collateral isn't high enough? Or what happens if you haven't got enough collateral? And what happens if your peg breaks? Because we could make a lot of money if I could make your peg break. People laughed at you. Never going to happen. And I come from the regulatory world initially, say, well, if it doesn't happen, that's great. But when it does happen, hopefully we don't lose 3/4 of the industry because you were stupid. We did something useful to ensure at least there would still be some players afterwards. It's changed quite a bit now. Basically, if you're doing central bank digital currency, you're doing it only at the central bank level. You're doing it purely within DSIPs and GSIPs. So there's a central bank backing you somewhere. And if you're outside of that space, you don't get to play. And that's reality. The extension that goes from that, and again, years ago, I was speaking to business people and leaders around the world, and was making the case that the US dollar as reserve currency was on its last legs, it was about to go, and people laughed at me. Martin, is it going to happen? Yeah, it's been reserve currency in the US forever and ever. The US will never allow it to happen. Yet the reality is that when you combine these central bank digital currencies together to have one currency that settles them all, like Lord of the Rings, the one ring that rules them all, that one ring, that one currency, that is the world's new reserve currency. It will be digital. So no more US dollars, no more pound sterling before it was US dollars, no more yard, one digital currency that settles everything. You had these discussions 3-4 years ago, people laughed at you. Now when you have these discussions, especially if you're having them at the central bank level, it's accepted fact. Obviously it hasn't rolled out to the rest of the world, but it's becoming, it is filtering down. Reality is now starting to sink in. And what we can do with these currencies obviously is significant. And things that you could never imagine before, it was just too far away for people to imagine, now are becoming commonplace. So now when you talk about these things, it's much more, okay, we can actually see this happening, whereas beforehand it was science fiction.
Okay, so maybe like just in the interest of covering different topics, I'll answer it from my perspective more of being an entrepreneur on this one. So look, the big challenge that we used to have was getting financed, right? I mean, you had ideas before. Building software is expensive. Having ideas and the VC market was not as developed 10, 15, 20 years ago as it is today. So it used to be very difficult to get your ideas to be funded. Today, it's a completely different world. You know, good ideas are being backed, and most importantly, we have in Canada a network of entrepreneurs that have done it before. So I think one of the things that is amazing now is that you have all these people that have built businesses that essentially know what it takes to take an idea from ground zero and then build it. And that's applicable to the finance space, but it's applicable to any technology sector in particular. So I would say that that now you're sitting on an entire ecosystem of businesses, whether that's in Ottawa, in Montreal, in Vancouver, or in Toronto, that of entrepreneurs that know how to build businesses and can take an idea from conception to realization. So I think that's completely different. Myself, I mean, the big challenges, going back to the initial question that you have, has always been about building a high performance team. So when you're competing in the fintech space, you are competing. Today, it's a bit more regionalized, but in fact, the market is worldwide. So our competitors are everywhere. And you just need to have be able to maintain and attract the top talent that you have. And once you have it, you need to be able to build and foster this vision that you have inside, that everyone needs to work together and everyone needs to pull in the right direction and so on. So that to me has been the greatest challenge, has always been to bring people from, and as I said earlier, like from different walks of life, getting ideas flowing, using design thinking to solve different business problems. The ultimate business problem we end up solving, it changes every month, right? So one month it's one thing, the next month it's something else, but making sure that you can build that has always been the key challenge. And yeah, so I would say that has been my main challenge in building our businesses.
Perfect. So I think we got a couple there in the Q&A section. So the first one for Benoit specifically, what inspired you to start multiple startups or to start? Yeah.
It's interesting, right? So I'm from northern Quebec. I came from a small mining town. I studied in Montreal and then in France, and it opened my eyes. And then I did a master's in Vancouver. And when I came back, I found a job for that small startup company called Algorithmics that later became one of the biggest provider of risk management services to large banks around the world. And I saw what at the very beginning, like I was not one of the first employees, but I was one of the first 100 employees, and I saw how cool it was to take an idea and bring it to fruition, and having all these people that at some point in time we had like 600, 700, 800 people working, and I just saw it was, and I thought it was really, really interesting. And the company was bought out by a large US company, and my partners and I just decided, let's do this again. Let's create another business. We've got all these ideas and so on. But clearly we were inspired by having seen it being done successfully in our first venture. And essentially that's what we did. So we created a firm. We specialize more in the hedge fund world, like investment, sold software in the US. In fact, when the last financial crisis occurred, it was at the very beginning. We were like 2 years into our venture, but it turned out that our software was absolutely critical to how financial markets were working, or our clients were working. So that gave us a great inspiration and so on. And then, decide after we sold it, it was too young to retire and really still have the passion for it and so on. So decided to create another one. So, yeah.
Perfect. What a great history for your startups. The next question, I think it's more general. So based on our current shifts towards digital banking, when do you think physical currencies and banking will become obsolete?
So I'll take this one. The reality is that physical cash is never going to become obsolete. There's always going to be a place for it, and it will always be in use. The issue with physical cash is that if I want to do a transaction that is totally anonymous, I want to get paid for my drug deal, I use cash for a reason. And most US dollar cash carries traces of cocaine because it is used in the drug trade. The thing with physical currencies and digital currencies is that they are both issued from the central bank. So they are both versions of money, and the central bank makes a decision as to how many physical banknotes they're going to have in circulation and what the denominations are going to be and how much digital currency they're going to have. So you try to restrict the amount of physical currency you have, reduce the number of bills you have, because what that does is that reduces the ability to do transactions in the black market. Because you've got to pay for things, and to pay for things you need physical currencies. So if I take away the paper bills, it's harder to do. The issue with doing that is that if you are in China, for example, if I have physical bill in my hands, it's actually worth more than the digital bill. So though the official rate is 1-to-1, the reality is that the physical bill is worth a little bit more to me, especially if I've got a lot more in the way of drug trade. So there are significant issues around this, and it's been a common occurrence around the world. Obviously, China has been a major example right now, but also it's occurred in Sweden and some of the other countries as well. The other part that goes with this is that the more corrupt your country is, the more advantageous it is to go to a central bank digital currency. It does a really good job of reducing the amount of corruption by making things much more visible. The flip side to that is that if you are in a very corrupt country, there are a lot of people doing everything they can to ensure that that central bank in your currency never gets issued. So you have an enormous wall to cover first before you actually go there. But the reality is there will always be physical currencies, always be physical cash. It's just a matter of how much. I would put it to you that in most cases, you will end up with 2 exchange rates, I think of Canada-US. You have a Canada-US exchange rate for buying currency will be based primarily on tourism. Some people traveling to and from, that'll be, let's say, the rate. Commercial trade settling between Canada will settle via a digital currency. It's not the exchange rate dollar. You can see a lot of that happening. It's already starting to happen. But bottom line here is that cash is always going to be in existence. It's just a matter of how much cash there is and how soon it's phased in. In North America, we take the view that if it doesn't happen in North America, it doesn't exist. So we tend to ignore what happens in Asia. We tend to ignore what happens in Europe and in South America. That's a big mistake here. When does this happen in North America? There is lots of discussion. One of the biggest issues, though, is what do you do about currencies settling around the world? Now you have not just one central bank involved, you have many, and a number of other things go with this. Privacy is a big issue with this as well, obviously. The privacy rights, that's a problem. So it's not going to go away. Timeline is open, but it is moving to more digital currency and less paper.
For sure. Thank you so much. Benoit, did you have anything to?
No, I don't particularly have a specific opinion about how fiat currencies will stay or disappear. Yeah.
Sounds good. Then I think we can move on to the next question. Also, I think a pretty general question. Did you originally plan on going into this field, or did you switch career paths multiple times?
So I'll probably start this one, and then Benoit can add to it. I spent my first 25 years of my career in financial services doing things the old-fashioned way. And I did my MBA after I had done my experience. So I came to my MBA late. The problem with doing that is that everything an MBA can basically teach you, I already knew because I had the experience and had the designations, etc., to back it up. So when I went back to school, and I went back to do it as a second career and to become a professor, which means I had to do a PhD. And the way to get there was an MBA and further research. So I deliberately chose to do blockchain. It was brand new technology. I could instantly see what this could do from a very entrepreneurial point of view. I could not ask for a better opportunity. And I deliberately chose this field. I was very early in the process. I was one of the very few people who could see the business side of this, when most others were kind of trying to find a way around. People typically come by and ask me, what does this do? What is a Bitcoin? And for me, the business side of things was obvious. Now, during my career, my regular career, I used to routinely change positions every couple of years in different industries. And the reason for that was I did not want to be tied down to being just a banker or just a pension fund person or just from wealth management. One of my employers was GE Capital, so the most aggressive to a financial regulator being the opposite side of things. So I had a very good view of how our industry worked from many parts of the world, from many points of view. And adding blockchain to this was for me a no-brainer. So yeah, for me, it was a deliberate choice. When I look at my students, I suggest to my students before they graduate that they need to look at their career as not being one long career in one company, but to look at it as being very entrepreneurial. You are really doing a series of gigs. Each gig might be 2 years to 4 years, depending on what it is. You need to have a plan because you are the asset, and you need to decide what you want to do and how. To that, I also remind my students that, especially around fintech, you can't be doing fintech when you're in your mid-40s and you've got business, you've got mortgage and car and kids to pay for. You can't afford the risk. So you're going to go into fintech, you need to do it right after school or very soon after school, or alternatively, you need to do it after you're retired and you're looking for something to do. So the kids are left with your big obligations out of the way. Those are your two risk opportunities. And you need to keep that in mind because life moves on and you don't want to be trying to do this at the same time you get other things happen. So those are things, that's what I would suggest on this.
Yeah, so let me take a bit of, again, a slightly different slant. I think it's good for you guys to hear a different perspective. So just to give you an idea, I started my first business, R-Square, the first one, after knowing that my wife was pregnant with triplets. So for me and one of my business partners asked me, why are you, you're not going to do this? And I said, of course I need to do this. And one of the reasons is that I didn't want to do it when the kids were older and so on. And I felt that if I didn't do it at that point in time, I would never get a chance to start my own firm. So I think I encourage everyone to join the industry. I think everyone has their own level of sensitivities around it and so on. I would for sure. I think the most important thing for me is that I would tell everyone, just follow what your passion is and try to figure out what interests you. And it's absolutely normal for people to change fields and change path along the way. I think, people say, only the strongest survive, but in fact, it's the people who adapt are the ones that survive. So I think that it's good. It's even welcome. We have a lot of people that come from different walks of life in our business, and I think that's something really good. So myself, I changed business or focus or industry or sub-industry, if you wish, 3 times in my career. But ultimately, the thought process and the way I was approaching solving problems and so on, that was a common denominator across all my jobs. So, or my firm. So essentially, it's the way you're thinking about solving problems and so on that matters. The actual industry doesn't matter as much. And but in fintech specifically, yes, you can expect. I mean, things are changing very fast, so you should expect change. And the one thing you need to prepare yourself is how can you quickly adapt to when changes are and take opportunities when they present themselves. So I would recommend that. But it's a good thing to change fast. It's a good thing to come from have the ability to pivot.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, both of you, for sharing your slightly different but equally useful perspectives. I think a lot of high school students, when they go into it, are worried about trying to follow the same path the whole way, or whether they should switch here and there. So I think it's very useful to hear both of these perspectives. Perfect. I think there's one more currently in the list. How do you suggest we build our networks as high school students?
Okay, so I'll throw a couple of things at you. I think as a high school student, no matter whether you want to go on the business side or the IT side, I think it would be very useful if you learned how to do coding. So probably you did a boot camp, something along those lines. You will meet many different people there. You will meet many different entrepreneurs there, and you will make a lot of contacts just by virtue of being at that coding camp. And there are lots of them in different areas, so it's not hard to find. Nice thing is that once you can code, you have the ability to take an idea in your head and just try it out. You can code it and write it and see if it works. And the process of doing that, you're also getting an idea as to whether you enjoy the doing the engineering side of things. Nice. I started life as a petroleum engineer. Or do you enjoy more the building of the business side of things? So this is just a tool, but I'm doing this with an overall business. You need to get some sense as to whether you can do that and what you enjoy. So is it just coding first? Try some coding, talk to various people. Once you've made your decision to go to college or university, you will get another huge opportunity to boost your networks. I know at McMaster, depending on what you want to do, if you do anything around fintech, you're probably coming my way. And we do a number of industry partnerships, internships between McMaster and different industry players. Could be a 4-month, could be an 8-month internship, different things. Then that will obviously improve your network as well. But to do that, you need to be in the university already, typically as an undergrad or as a master, depending on what level student you are. After that, it's just a matter of what have you learned, what have you done, what are your passions. Obviously, part of this is, remember when you graduate from this, you're a fairly young person. So if you want to start family later, you got to decide what do you want, what do you like, and where should you go. So if you like blue-eyed blondes, maybe you should be looking for a job in Sweden or Scandinavia, so you can do both at the same time. These are important things to keep in mind. So as a high school student, first thing is learn some coding, go to a boot camp. Once you've done that, pick a university and then decide, make sure you do courses in fintech, decide what you enjoy and do that more. I would suggest that when you are doing undergrad, do a co-op program versus just a straight get it done as soon as possible. Co-op is better, simply because you'll be using the time to do internships, building your network as well. Nice thing with internships is you can try different industries, each different thing. So maybe one is a startup tech, another one is a bank, doing what you want to do. so that when you graduate and it's time to actually start thinking about making some money and paying for your bills, you're in a much better position to do so. You've got the network now and you can go.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. I mean, I think first, I mean, networking is important, just to remind everyone. So it is one of the key elements that people have and need to leverage. My personal experience has been that even in my undergraduate degree, which had really not that much to do with fintech at the time, I ended up having fantastic students that I was studying with, and so on, and they ended up working in various industries that could help you down the road. So it might be a VC person that ends up with the financing arm, or legal people, and so on and so forth. So don't forget that the people you're interacting today might be one of the strongest component of your network later. So don't wait to build strong relationships with people at school. Don't wait for university. Start it very early, because you never know. I mean, and people normally end up, you would be surprised by I mean, I'm always shocked by the great successes that people that I was studying with, and different people ended up having. So I think that's very important. And then as Martin was saying, I think, yeah, I mean, the whole notion of studying and learning your craft at school is critical. I would say don't let that stop you from applying to a job if you feel that you can. We've hired people that had very little skill set in our firm, but we ended up being very impressed by their personalities and so on. So this is something I do want to make sure that people understand. But ultimately, doing those co-op or those internships are critical. At Digit, we not so much with undergraduate students, although we have a bit more now, but a lot of people in their master's program and so on. We make a point of hiring every year a number of people through that, and which becomes, quite frankly, the main source of us hiring people afterwards. So a lot of the people that come to Digit to do an internship, if they're good, then we end up offering them a long-term position after that. And when they join in, normally they don't have a lot of experience, so it's all a part of the journey. But if we're impressed with you, normally we offer you a position. So this is a part of the entire networking exercise. Yes.
Perfect. Thank you guys so much once again for your great insight. So just looking at the time real quick, we are at 2. So that does bring us to our closing. Does anyone have any final little questions that they really need to get out before we close off? I'm seeing none. So perfect. I think Martin and Benoit gave a very insightful experience on the field in general. So once again, we'd like to thank you both for taking the time out of your schedules to come here today and talk a bit about that with us. We'd also like to thank everyone who came out. Maybe some had to drop due to timing, but we'd like to thank everyone for coming out, and those who are viewing it on the recording or on the live stream, thank you as well. And hopefully you are all able to gain some new insight on the field of fintech, and maybe are inspired to pursue a career in this in the future. So that is all we have for today, and we hope to see you at our next session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.